Pathfinder, if you look at it, every one of us in this room, and though we're together, we have all drifted off of the path of life, the societal norm, the path that everyone seems to follow. We've jumped off into the woods. We've got our own kind of little clearing, and now what? Now where are we supposed to go? Now what's it supposed to look like? Now what are we going to do? And that's a big question, because the guy that's 25 years old, that's full on in the warrior stage of life, is not going to be able to relate very well or use the same tools that the man that's 65 or 70 who is in the sage aspect or stage of his life is a man. It's going to be something different. Granted, you can't become a sage unless you've been through that warrior stage of your life. But the sage enacting the warrior mentality, trying to keep up, it doesn't work. It's like the 50-year-old guy that dyes his hair and wears an earring. I mean, it's just not going to happen. It's funny. Everybody gets a kick out of that. So Pathfinder is kind of this, it's this label that I put on everything because, well, it's all I can think of. Now, the Pathfinder in the Army is someone who is dropped in the most difficult terrain imaginable. Their job is to clear out a landing area in an LZ so we can drop in troops or equipment, materials, usually some of the toughest dudes on the block. And here we all are in the wilderness, basically, looking for someone to light the way, a torch. Who's going to show us how to move forward to the objective? More importantly, who's going to identify that objective? Kenaz is that torch, and there's something interesting about Kenaz and Isa. You can make all of the other runes in the alphabet with Kenaz and Isa, and fire and ice. So every ancestor has a torch, all the way back to the beginning, and each one of those torches gives us some kind of hint of which way we need to go, what it needs to look like. So that's why I picked Pathfinder, because I had an immense amount of respect for those individuals when I was in the service. This is what it appears like to outsiders on social media. Looks kind of like that. So my sister goes to look at, what are you doing, Bryan? And she looks at social media for even a half hour on one of these other message boards. She sees this nonsense. Right. She sees people making fun of, talking to each other. And many times this is what it looks like to people who are in Asatru. And do you see anyone lighting the way? I mean, they're all kind of going the same direction, but it's a clusterfuck.
Chaotic.
Yeah, it is chaotic, chaos energy. And that is kind of like what we were just talking about, that path that we're all on in life. There's a lot of things that are going to pull us to the left and to the right. And we've got to figure out which part of that chaos is something we can utilize, or if it's something we need to avoid altogether, which I tend to be something we need to avoid altogether. But what's going to help us move forward on our path? What's going to help us identify that objective? What's going to help us become what we're supposed to become? What even is the clue of what we're supposed to become? What is it supposed to look like? What should we resemble if we jump in on this path, hit this LZ running, and head out into the brush? What are we supposed to look like if we're going to become heathen, if we're going to be Asatru? And that's the issue here. As my friend Chase McDougall pointed out, all roads lead to Rome. People have apparently known this for centuries. It's a fine analogy for the road we're all walking on now. Rome is that final gateway to the next dimension. Do you want to travel that road constantly pushing a block in front of you? Or would you rather stroll along and be able to smell the roses every now and again? Everybody travels that road, they're going to get to Rome. And just like us, we're all going to get to that doorway of death, one way or another. How we choose to do it is entirely up to us. And I don't think people realize that or have realized that for a long time. We've continued to adopt trains of thought that are a continuous recycling, automatic thought process of things we've done in the past or things that might happen in the future. And we overwhelm our thinking process to the point that it becomes as automatic as breathing, as the beating of our heart, as the digestion of our food, and all of it centers around something that has happened or something that might happen. And we create this sense of artificial stress and we feed on it. Oh my gosh, what's going to happen? God, I wish I hadn't have done that. And how do we stop it? Because that thought process right there, that lack of clarity is what creates the difficulty in all of our lives traveling to Rome. So when we get into Asatru, all of a sudden I began to see these ideas that, hey, I have an opportunity to stop thinking that way. I have an opportunity to stop feeling these feelings. I have an opportunity to walk through life like a champion instead of struggling like some savage beast wrapped up in his own thoughts, struggling with the mud puddle because he views the mud puddle as large as the lake, the rock the size of a mountain. Everything is the end of the world. When's the other shoe going to drop? That thought process is the predominant thought process of 90% of the population of this world. They expect things to go bad. They know it's going to be hard. Well, shit, if you know it's going to be hard, you can bet your ass it is going to be hard. We have an opportunity to change that. Pathfinder is all about the example of Odin, specifically the sacrifice of Odin to himself. This sacrifice of Odin to himself is a much discussed, sometimes much maligned thing. My perception of ego and some of the school of thought that I subscribe to is that the ego is the sense of self that we all create in our own minds. That idea of who and what we are. This idea, all the culmination of all the things we have done. Matter of fact, when someone asks you who you are, you're going to give them your name. That's part of your ego. That's who you think you are. I've done this, this, and this. This is where I'm at. I'm successful at this, this, and this. I've done this, this, and this. And that is by no stretch of the imagination who you are. That small sliver, when it gets out of proportion, as in what we usually refer to as an ego, a false ego, a bloated ego, an overly bloated sense of self-importance. That train of thought that I just subscribed, that I told you about, is the fuel for that thought process. And that thought process, just like when you run over an animal's head and your eyes bug out, our eyes are bugging out from that thought, from that huge ego. Odin sets an example for us when he sacrifices himself to himself. Is he killing himself to kill himself? Or is he sacrificing that sense of who he is so he can become what he was supposed to become? I would submit to you that you can believe either way you want, but the latter is the mindset, the idea that if you adopt it, if you kind of believe in that, if you begin to apply it to your own life of sacrificing those parts of yourself that are no longer beneficial to you moving forward in this world, you might enjoy a little bit of success. And see, that's an important part here. Why would Odin do such a thing? He wasn't just walking along and someday said, I'm gonna hop up on Yggdrasil and get rid of a piece of myself. That is not what happened. Because he knew he needed to? Because Mimir might have mentioned it? No. Because he lost his temper and then lost his throne. At the Vanir War, everyone gets distracted by this whole idea of Golvag, and then the Vanir got pissed. No, the statement was, should worship belong to one or should it belong to all? A communist idea. We should all be worshipped because we're all special. Odin and his brothers put all that together. And now you got a bunch of yahoos coming in here saying, oh, well, we should all get equal share of the worship. Odin, being who he is, being the man that built it all up, feeling fairly self-important, being the king of Asgard, full of his own self and his own power, cast the spear over their head, said, Odin has you all, and lost his ass. How many of us have been through somewhere in life where we're walking along, feeling pretty good about things, and the next thing you know, we're out on our ass, we're sleeping in our truck, we've lost all our money, we don't have a job, we don't have any friends, we feel alone. Then what do? What is it about ourselves we're supposed to change? How much are we supposed to sacrifice? What's that look like when you have no one else to rely on? The Aesir Vanir War was the result of the Vanir asking, should worship belong to one group of gods or to all of them? Odin's ego was such that he decided to go towards protect this image of himself as the All-Father. Trouble was he lost. Now he is in unfamiliar territory. Now he is wandering away from the crowd he is used to. Now he is dealing with being alone. I don't think that those kinds of ideas or concepts were necessarily too troubling to Odin, but for people like us, it's a very painful state to be in. To go through life, to be successful and to find yourself all alone, to go out there and do the best at what you were told to do, and then to find yourself succumbing to unimaginable pain and confusion when you're alone, to not be able to relate to individuals around you because you see things in a different light. Odin sacrificed his ego to get through all of that. And we're in the same boat. Many of us find ourselves alone. We have all found ourselves at such crossroads that we decided to change the foundation of our spiritual being. And that is probably 90% of the people that I've talked to that have come in over the last 10 years. There's been a crossroads in their life. There's been something that's happened. There's been some kind of, a lot of people have had a dream. A lot of people have had an idea that this ain't working. I'm going to change. I'm going to radically change the foundation of my spiritual being. I'm going to go with something entirely different. Well, we didn't just stray off the path. We jumped into a clearing of our own making, like a Pathfinder. We jumped into the forest all on our own. We've begun to clear out the trees. We've begun to build a lodge. We've begun to build a home for ourselves. And we've begun to do something different than everybody else in the world has done. Are we still on that path to Rome? Are we still on that road like everybody else? Or have we found ourselves an easier, softer way? That is the hope of most people that make this transition. That we have found an easier, softer way. That we have found a way where we might neatly skirt the issues that brought us to this crossroads to begin with. And that is not the case. Odin sacrificed part of himself to continue on this journey. And when we jump in this, there's some growth that's going to, of a necessity, need to take place to successfully continue moving down this road to death. Or we will continue to struggle, albeit with different labels and different names, as we did when we were on the road, the other road that the rest of the world likes to travel. But no one's told us what the objective is, what our life will look like moving forward. Out of this path of Asatru, there is built a light, a torch to light the way. We call it Kenats, we call it our ancestors, we call it our gods. And it's funny when you slow down on that road and you stop and take a look around instead of just hopping into this new LZ, start clearing it out. We're all excited, we're full of motivation, we're full of energy, we're full of power. We've got a new untapped reservoir of energy. We're full of youth and energy and life again. It's like, oh, well, it's almost like Ragnarok. Life and the love of life emerges from inside of us once again. And what do we do with it? Well, that's kind of the point. What Odin picked up was an outline to make the most of the gifts given to mankind by himself, Vili, and Ve. Even more crucial was that he heard the songs of his ancestors. These are the gifts that Odin, Vili, and Ve departed upon man. Soul they had not, sense they had not, heat nor motion nor goodly hue. Soul gave Othin, sense gave Honir, heat gave Lothar, and goodly hue. Owned oath and law, the breath. If you look at the Old Testament, you will find that, let's see, who is it? There is an H that is introduced into one of the names that represents the breath of inspiration. He is known as something through part of the Bible, but then there's an H introduced into his name after a great trial that he overcomes. That H is the breath of inspiration from God. And then we have right here, this soul gave Othin, sense gave Honir, heat gave Lothar, and goodly hue. That soul, that is breath, just like Sean was talking about earlier, that breath of life. And there's something very, very powerful about it. the goodly hue, that's that color, that's the flow of life, that's blood, that's oxygen saturating the hemoglobin in the blood so that it's red. Very simple. The sense that Honer gave us, that's also very important. So not only did they give us the sense, but they gave us an example to follow. The imagery of the gods showing us the way is repeated. What is also shown is what happens when we only have a part of it. Otter and Freya, Cone Rig becomes Rig, Balder returns as ruler, Sigurd and Brunhild get destroyed, and Loki's own thought process binds him. Otter and Freya in the Heimdallgoth. Here's Otter, who has found all of his energy. He's faithful. His altar stone is turned to glass from the heat of the great fires, and ever was it wet with blood, asking again and again the goddess to show him this way or show him that way, and she pulls him forward and brings him along this path. A lot of people think she's riding him. I personally don't. She goes and she gets this most savage, basest, simplest of individuals who is ruled by passions, who is a simple dullard, this giant Heimdall, calls her sister, says, come on out. And she says, release your wolves to move him along the way, for I will not tire my worthy steed. She cuts a wolf loose on his ass. Right? So she's going to motivate him. She gives him this blessing of cutting a wolf. And in that time of trial and error, this giant tells him what? She relates the entire ancestry. She reminds him of who his ancestors are. So he's going to move on this path. He's going to deal with this trial and tribulation. He's going to remember his ancestors. And when he gets where he's supposed to be going, there's supposed to be a promise there. And that's outlined in the lay and in the book. But that's something important to remember. We've already got a bunch of gifts. We're not going to sit here and cause a blood eagle and sacrifice a cat and a goat and whatever and burn fires and get more gifts. We've already got a ton of them. Cone Rig becomes Rig. This is so important. It may outline the three classes of individuals, but it also outlines the generational aspect of the introduction of this faith and the welcoming of this faith into our home. And it's a personal favorite of mine. Rig visits the great-grandfather, the great-grandmother. They invite him into the home, songs she knew to sing. This married couple in the simple dirt hovel of a hut welcome this faith into their home and make it a part of it. It shows off in their children. Their children grow to become fantastic at what they're supposed to become. The second generation, the grandfather and the grandmother. Rig comes along. He starts talking to them. This couple welcomes this faith into their home. Their children begin to show promise. They become successful at what they're supposed to become. When he comes to visit the mother and the father, he comes into a home finery with dishes. They serve a good meal, and they are welcome. That faith is welcome to the home. Those children become successful. They become landowners. They become jarls. And that jarl learns many things. And then Rig comes out and calls jarl his own. He names him as his ancestor. Jarl has a son named Cone. Cone Rig learns the language of the birds. Cone Rig learns the use of the runes, and he sheds the cone and becomes Rig himself, our first example of what we might become. These creators, these beings who have the ability to create the world we would wish to live in. Walk into any person's home and you will see the world they wish to live in. It will be reflected in their art, in their books, in the people they have at their table, and the faith that they enjoy. Balder returns as ruler. Balder, when Loki takes the individual at the edge of the crowd, the kind of outcast, the handicapped, or the crippled individual, and encourages him to take a shot and steals the light from the world, steals the sun and the light from the world. That's an interesting thing you need to pay attention to. We need to understand that it is the ego of an individual. He's listening to that voice in his ear. He steals the light from everyone. One bad apple screws it all up. But when he goes to hell, he is welcome. He's got a wonderful place to live, to carry out the rest of his days. He sends back an arm ring, the sign of a chieftain, and a powerful chieftain he must be. That goes back to his father. He sends that back that every ninth night, 8 more just like it drop. Think about the power of a chieftain that gets to hand out 8 armbands every night. He also, Nana, this partner that Balder has cleaved to and made his partner, they will travel through that as one. Opposing forces, equal and opposing forces, the yin and the yang, the unstoppable force of the immovable object. Nana sends back a homespun garment. Anytime a young man ventured forth in those days, he ventured out of his home with the garment his mother had made for him. Now, this powerful indication that Balder has made that separation and has made a complete commitment to his wife, Nana, she sends that garment back. He is in the right hands. He is where he is supposed to be. And they send back one more thing. They send back a ring to Fulla. And how many little sisters would love to have a ring from their older sister after she has made that kind of scary transition from being a daughter to being a wife? He goes through this time. Who knows what he deals with? But by those indications of this successful transition, we might begin to think that he's going to make this transition. He's going to travel this road. His road leads to a light. His road leads to a new kind of doorway. His road leads to a reemergence. He is separated from all of the chaotic, ego-driven violence and all of the things that the world is undergoing, while he has created himself a new LZ. He makes these successful transitions. He walks through the door. He returns as the ruler. Not somebody you just say, hey, how you doing to? He runs the show. And he has all of the characteristics necessary to do so. He has full access to the knowledge necessary to pass through not only the cosmic Ragnarok, but also the individual Ragnaroks that we deal with sometimes on a daily basis, sometimes in the middle of our lives. He returns as a king. Sigurd and Brunhild get destroyed. Everyone loves the idea of Sigurd and Brunhild. Here's Sigurd, this young man, he's adopted by Regan. But I would suggest to you that Regan poisons his thought process every bit as powerfully as modern day society poisons the thought process of our children. The first thing he tells him is, the gods wronged me. My brother has all my treasure. I think you can help me get it back and you'll get a part of it. So all through the tale, Regan is this coward. He hides on the ship during the storm. He does teach him a skill. And it's a valuable skill for what he's got to do. First thing he does is seek vengeance on the people that slayed his father. This is a good deal. And in that trial, in that effort, he gets wisdom and guidance from Odin himself. As soon as he's done with that, he's got Regan, he's got society barking in his ear again. Hey, wait a minute, it's not so. You need to come finish this up for me. Let's go do this. There's treasure and all this. So they go and they slay the dragon Fafnir. Or he slays the dragon Fafnir while Regan hides in the damn bushes. Sigurd calls him a coward. But in that, there's a lot that goes on in that tale. But what you have to see is this young man not only breaking free of the bonds of youth, but also breaking free of some of the bonds of his societal conditioning that Regan put him through. And when he learns the language of the birds, and once again, as Cone, he learns the language of the birds. When he begins to see these flows of energy across the earth, when he slays the dragon that sits on the hoard of gold, and he begins to see things for what they are, when he begins to see this poisoning of his thought process, when he begins to understand how important and powerful he might really be as an individual, that's when he begins to learn the language of the birds. That's when he begins to understand these flows of energy across the earth. I say that because if you look at birds, you can take a bird that has never known its mother or father and hatch that son of a gun over here, and he will find his way to his proving or mating or winter feeding grounds with no guidance whatsoever. Something inside this development of a bird is so sensitive that it understands. I don't know if it's cosmic rays or solar wind or gravitational pull, but it understands flows of energy. I would submit to you that this is something that our heroes are figuring out. These flows of energy across the world and their ability to align themselves with them and become what they're supposed to become. But Sigurd goes on beyond that. He finds Brunhild. He finds the estranged daughter of Odin, essentially. He frees her from the burning. Here is a man who has what it takes to cross through the fire and set the woman free, that she might expose the feminine beauty of who she is to the world without fear of recompense. Most women have a coat of armor about themselves because the inner beauty of every woman is a threat to this world because it has so much power. Sigurd is a strong enough man to create an environment where she might share that beauty with the world and not be afraid. I think that is the responsibility of every heathen man, to create an environment where a woman might be able to freely express who and what she is. There's another way we create the world we want to live in. She tells him, she gives him a memory draught. She recites a prayer. Hail the day, hail the sons of day, hail the night, and her daughters too. Look on us now with loving eyes, and waiting we victory win. She tells him part of the runes. She tells him part of the Havamal. So this estranged daughter gives him part of the information necessary to move forward in this world from his ancestral heritage. And as soon as they come off that mountaintop and that happiness of love, they get bewitched, they are bamboozled, they are befuddled by the world, and they are destroyed. They don't have a complete knowledge of who and what they are. Many of us are in that same boat. We wish to step forward. We know there is greatness available out there for us. We feel in our hearts that there is something magnificent for us to move forward into. And we find ourselves shortchanged from, where is it? How do I get it? We must learn to understand who and what we are. And Loki's own thought process binds him. That's the example of what's doing it. At Ygri's feast, anytime there is an individual that is doing better than Loki or getting more attention than he is, he kills him. Plain and simple. He's not going to try to measure up to that standard, much like the people on social media that will malign most of us in this room. They will not try to measure up to a standard. They will not try to improve themselves. They will more than willingly engage in the kind of character assassination you hear at any water cooler on a Monday morning by somebody you don't like. And they will do it on social media to the tune of, if they get 100 people that like them, they feel like they've done something great. But they don't realize that 100 people doesn't mean shit in the world of 7 billion. But they will proceed on as if it does. That thought process, that kind of character assassination, is binding them to something they hate. I don't even realize it. Loki goes to Ygri's feast. He kills the servant Fimafing. And then he proceeds to sit down at the table. All of us have a seat at the table. All of us have a seat at the table of the divine. And our ability to fully understand, comprehend, take advantage, and make use of that is entirely dependent upon our thought process. And Loki exemplifies the thought process that justifies he does not deserve that seat at the table. He goes through and he insults every god and goddess. And in every instance, he demonstrates his misunderstanding or his inability to comprehend how the divine interact with each other. He humanizes them. He brings them down to his level and insults them. And the fact of the matter is, buddy, you ain't got what it takes. They're way up here, and he's simply trying to humanize it so he doesn't have to measure up. And they bind him to the rock. And if you think about it, there's a lot of people in this world that are in that same boat. Instead of trying to understand the divine or try to raise ourselves up to that idea of a divine idea within our faith, this way of life we call Asatru, we will humanize it. We will bring it down to the lowest common denominator, and we will call it good. You'll see him do it. I lost my point and all that shit. Anyway, this is, and Rig emerges from the brush and tells the girl that he is his ancestor. His son Cone learns the use of the runes and the language of the birds and becomes Rig himself. And the Heimdall Yoth, Freya awakens Heimla, tells her to release her wolves upon Otter, for she will not tire her worthy steed. During this challenging time with the faithful, he learns his ancestry. Sigurd slays the dragon. He learns the language of the birds. He frees the divine feminine. He learns part of the Havamal. He learns part of his ancestry. And
and utilizing just a fraction of the knowledge he ought to know, the world destroys him and his wife. So this idea of understanding our ancestry, of understanding these runes, is essential for us to even begin to represent or even look like Balder as he returns to become ruler of his own realm. Now, Ragnarok is important because I firmly believe that like most of the concepts and ideas in our Lord, they work from a cellular level all the way up to a universal level and all locations in between. Ragnarok is just one of those. Cells die, they explode, they burn up. People die, they pass away. Nation states die and decay and wither. Continents move and shift and they're destroyed. Planets are destroyed all the way up. Each one of them is a Ragnarok. Did you poop? I did. Life and the love of life is what emerges after the Ragnarok of our own lives. Once we pass through some of these kind of trials and tribulations, the first thing we feel is alive. We made it. And we begin to develop a love of life. That is Leif and Leifthersir. That is who emerges from Yggdrasil after the Ragnarok. The Ragnarok of our own crossroads. Ragnarok works from all these levels. Every time life and the love of life emerges, be it from our newfound grip on life, our actual children emerging from us, to the hope of humanity emerging from Yggdrasil. Therein lies the first clue about what our path of life should look like. We ought to proceed in life as if we love our life. And once we have that kind of mindset, everything changes. Once we begin to understand how much we love our own life, everything changes. And being able to love our own life means stopping that automatic thought process about what has happened and what might happen, and be right here and right now. In the most difficult of counseling sessions I've had with individuals who may be much wiser and much older than me, who are dealing with painful situations, the most important thing I can say to any of them: you may not be able to overcome their objections. They may be so thoroughly entrenched in feeding off of that negative energy that the only thing you can do is circumvent it and say, you know what, in this moment, right here and right now, you and I, we are okay. And that might be the best we can do. But therein lies the roots of our ability to love the life we're in, because there's something very special born in those moments that allow us to appreciate each other in ways that we have been forbidden to appreciate. What would happen if you suddenly realized that there was in fact a blueprint as old as time itself contained in our Lord? What every man's life looked like. And with a subtle change of perception, a change of mind, a different vantage point, all things become clearer. The whole point of Pathfinder is the realization that you can change the viewpoint. You have permission to do so. The Elder Futhark is an amazing tool, and some people will be able to alter each rune. But if I may, let me offer you another point of view on that. As a young man begins to develop his mobile wealth, he must have the strength of pretending and protection from on high. It will require the wisdom of his ancestors for this journey on life, and that torch will light the way. He will enjoy gifts, and there will be joy in his life. But sometimes Hagalas, there will be those cataclysmic comets that strike the earth and change everything, and then it will be a time of need. There will be ice, and things will be frozen underneath. But there might be a harvest under the tree. You might get lucky and receive some kind of the elk, a harvest. Everyone that partakes in that harvest will enjoy success. An elk in a village of a time of need means a huge feast. And Tiwas, the North Star, the just sacrifice, the willingness to protect. Everyone that has been through all of that, stand by each other, will result in new growth. And the teamwork among men that have become something more, they will understand Laguz, the interconnectedness of all things. We're all made of 80% of water, and we will develop the God seed, understand a new homeland, and a new day will dawn. If that might not mean shit to a lot of people, but to me, I see a pattern there. For every individual just starting this journey to find his way on there. If you find yourself in Hagalas, everything in your life has been destroyed, you have a path to go along. If you find yourself at Dagas at the new day, you're understanding what that new day in the homeland is going to be much different than just this right here. There's a path there. For 150,000 years, men just like us have been on this planet, and there have been 20-something cataclysm. Let me see that book. There have been 22 cosmic events that so altered the environment of the world that hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of men and women lost their lives. And somehow these signals, these little Kinas and Esau and their special formation have moved through time, have survived wars, famines, pestilence, death, the loss of lives of hundreds of millions of men and women in the 20th century alone because of political ideologies. When old men were not able to tell these stories to the next generation or the generation after that, these symbols and that path that they represent, the energies that they are, even where you sound them out, where you read it literally, where you, however you want to perceive them, however you want to make use of these great tools that are the keys to the universe, they're still here, just like the ones and zeros that are encoded on a golden record that went out into space in a spacecraft we call Voyager. This path to our gods is still here. I'm telling you folks, there's a depth to this faith we are only beginning to scratch the surface of. Not everyone needs to adopt a radical new political idea to be Asatru. Not everyone is going to develop themselves to the fullest of their abilities. Some people just want to be comfortable and happy. Not everyone is going to be a Govdi, chieftain, folk builder, or a shaman. Not everyone is going to be a spiritual leader for thousands or millions. Most people simply want to live happy lives. Some people simply want to be able to sit down with their children and grandchildren to enjoy a meal and talk about the good old days. Saw that and over. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think in a world that's as messed up and chaotic as we have right now, that right there might be a real good place to start. A real simple kind of caring and loving for each other, the raising of families, the ability to touch each other's heart in ways that are forbidden or looked down upon. But it's time for us to find that way. It's time for us in our LZ, before we rush off into the woods chasing a light or a will-o'-the-wisp or whatever you want to call it, let's build a home from which we might move forward from as kings in our own right. And that's what I'm working on right now. You are going to have many different stages and examples of what you are supposed to be in life. At 75, you cannot be the warrior and adventurer and lover. At 25, you cannot be the sage or the king. Finding your way forward means identifying the objective. We need to know where we are. We need to figure out where we want to be. And then we work our butts off for to keep a positive frame of mind. Our thoughts create our reality. As we travel that road to death, are we going to do so dreading every step of the way? Are we going to move forward like he talks about in the culture of Teutons as happy men? Because that's the whole story here. This whole concept, the whole overreaching idea of it has really captured my thought process, because when I look out at all of the people that I deal with, I see most people who simply want to be happy. And that's, I think, the best thing that I could possibly give to anyone. So this whole idea of Pathfinder, I'm still working on it, still writing. I'm writing another book. But life and the love of life is a fine cataloging of everything I just spoke about. And the overriding emphasis is that it is time for us to enjoy life and the love of life. Who knows where we might go from there? That's it, folks. Does anybody have any questions? You can go ahead and stop that.
It's good.